Welcome back. Panelists here. Hugh Hewitt, host on the Salem Radio Network. Yamiche Alcindor, White House correspondent for PBS NewsHour. Presidential historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, whose book, Leadership in Turbulent Times, comes out in paperback this week. Timing. Why now? And Mark Leibovich, chief national correspondent for the New York Times Magazine. Well, Doris, Leadership in Turbulent Times. We did some we talked to a few voters in New Hampshire yesterday just to see how they're responding quickly. Take it with a grain of salt, but the comments were interesting. Take a listen.
A lot of people like Trump, but they're too scared to say anything because we got some wackos out there that want to punch you in the face if you say you like Trump.
I think we should go through with the process, whether it messes with the outcome of the 2020 election. I think that's its own kind of ball of wax.
I think that we're divided anyway, right? So moving forward with potential impeachment procedures, I think, is not going to really do anything different.
Give us your sort of that historical view. What's happening?
Well, you know, when I look back at the 3 impeachments that I've lived through, I mean, I really only was there for Nixon and Clinton, but I feel like I was there with Andrew Johnson. The critical thing is, how is history going to regard what the House is doing right now? Will it be like Nixon, that the consensus will be afterwards that they had to do this because he had to be held accountable? And then in the end, Republicans came along, and in the end, Ford says our long national nightmare is over. Or will it be like Clinton, regarded as a partisan endeavor that boosts Clinton, in that case would boost Trump, and doesn't lead to a discussion? And the real challenge, I think, is the debate within the way they're going to conduct these hearings. They can't just throw around words like abuse of power or violation of oath. They have to explain. It has to be a giant civics lesson to the country to understand why are these things such that these people had to feel the need to try and impeach him now before the election. And that's the story that has to be told. You have to be able, just like these people are talking to you, if they're successful in making it clear that they think he should be impeached, somebody has to be able to tell a story to the person sitting next to them in the bar that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. This is why it had to be done. If they can't do that, and then it simply goes away and it's part of the Russian investigation, the country's going to be more divided than ever before.
And there's a need for speed. You hate to say that. There's a need for both speedy thoroughness. Is that possible? Mark.
It's going to be hard. I mean, I think what people do miss here, and we say everyone's divided anyway, people are in their corners, there actually is a middle here. I mean, the middle is narrow. It's narrower than it might have been in the 70s during Watergate, but there is a time, and I think it would behoove certainly Democrats to do this as quickly as possible, although also as thoroughly as possible, to actually win over maybe a 10% in the middle of this who are actually amenable to some facts that could potentially change their mind on some things.
If this stays a fact-finding mission, it likely will continue to get support. Early polling is showing the public is open to this investigation, Hugh.
You know, I want to pick up on something that Professor Kearns said, which is...
he was my student.
I was her student.
I told you
she
I was
like
older
10.
than everybody.
She was like 10. But the most important thing that was said this morning thus far is Adam Schiff came on, and he went full Alice in Wonderland, Queen of Hearts. Verdict first, trial later. I believe he destroyed his credibility this morning on this show as a fair arbiter of this process. The key other thing about is there enough time, is there a middle? That middle is tired of investigating President Trump. It has gone on for 2 years, and the most interesting part of the Nancy Pelosi decision to go for a fast impeachment is the implicit but very real concession that the Mueller report had no impeachable offense, no obstruction, no collusion. It's gone. They have erased it from the record. So Adam Schiff is biased, and Nancy Pelosi has admitted that Mueller exonerated Trump.
Let's talk about the simple story that Democrats had been searching for a very long time. The Mueller report was a 448-page report that people were confused about. Now they have a sentence that's about 25 words that says the president of the United States was trying to get a foreign country to interfere in the 2020 election. That's what Democrats have been looking for their entire time that President Trump was in office, and they finally have it here. And I think that's why we see Representative Schiff saying, listen, the cover-up might be important, but the most important thing is what the president said on the call. That's what's at the heart of this, and I think that's why there's political risk there for both Democrats and Republicans.
All right, I'm going to get to some of the key players that are going to become stars of this investigation. These are the folks named in the whistleblower complaint: Pence, Barr, Pompeo, Giuliani, Yovanovitch, the ambassador, Volker, the special envoy who resigned Friday, Sondland, and the U.S. Attorney Durham. I want to focus on Rudy Giuliani here a minute, guys, because It feels like if things get really bad for the president, that Rudy is already looking like the scapegoat, the easiest scapegoat. Republicans are ready to turn on him. I wish he would shut the heck up. Republicans sour on Giuliani, says the Politico headline. I think it would be a good thing if he would take a vacation. He's as wild as a March hare, from John Kennedy. I'm not sure he's helping the president by being on TV every 15 minutes, said Lindsey Graham. I wish he would shut the heck up, said another Republican lawmaker. Hugh Hewitt, could Rudy be the guy that everybody concentrates there? Yeah, I don't like this. Don't impeach the president. Rudy's a bad guy.
He's not John Dean, and the one thing we have to be careful of is while he indeed is an object of controversy and scorn often inside the Beltway, he cuts through everything outside of the Beltway. So when you go to Warren, Ohio, people hear him and they respect him and they listen to him.
Lebo?
I think they hear him because he is everywhere. I mean, I think what he is emblematic of is he is, first of all, he is a proxy for the president. He is his personal attorney, or, you know, sometimes he's a free-range chicken, as Senator Kennedy would say, right? But he also is someone who, I mean, the fact that he's out there so much is emblematic of the fact that a lot of Republicans are not comfortable being out there very much. The defense of President Trump has not come to any kind of coherent, message. And look, whatever Rudy Giuliani says on a given day becomes the message, and he becomes sort of a lightning rod here.
But when you talk to Rudy Giuliani, the issue with that is that he's also talking about all the other people that he says were involved. He says the State Department called me.
He keeps inviting, he basically says, here, Adam Schiff, here are more people to subpoena.
Here are more people to subpoena. And there's this idea that really there's a long list of people that Rudy Giuliani says is part of that. And even though the Mueller report might not have been impeachable offenses, what you see in the Mueller report is a cast of characters either trying to mitigate the president's actions or trying to help them along. In the complaint, what do you see? A group of people who are either trying to help him, which is Rudy Giuliani, or trying to mitigate him, which is Kirk Volker.
Doris, you're going to get the last words here. You mentioned something very smart about the Nixon impeachment. In the moment, it was very partisan. After it was over, there was a consensus. You hear Mitt Romney say deeply troubling. You hear Ben Sass saying, let's not quickly rally around here. Is that what you're watching for?
I think it's really important for the country, if this is going to go through, that it becomes at least more bipartisan than it is at the beginning. And when you do hear Republican senators beginning to speak up, that what we saw in the face is troubling. If more facts come out, maybe more people will come to the forward that we don't know. Who are the White House officials who talked to the whistleblower? Hopefully facts will drive this forward, and you'll see some consensus. That's what we have to hope for the country, either a consensus that he shouldn't be impeached or that he should.
I have a feeling Senate Republicans are in a better place to do that than House Republicans. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.